There's a $50 trillion wealth transfer unfolding right now, and most people are positioned on the losing end. Not because they're irresponsibly, not because they made foolish financial choices, but because the system is intentionally structured to extract wealth from the middle class during every crisis and funnel it upward. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's historical economic fact, and it has repeated itself in every major crash. In 2008, the middle class lost $16 trillion in household wealth foreclosures, job losses, forced stock liquidations. Meanwhile, the top 1% gained. They bought foreclosed homes at 30 to 50% discounts. They bought stocks at the exact bottom when the S&P hit 666. And when prices normalized by 2013, the recovery didn't return wealth to the people who lost it. The gains stayed concentrated at the top. $16 trillion moved from the bottom 90% to the top 1% in a single crisis. During the 2020 pandemic crash, the middle class lost jobs, savings, and businesses. 22 million people unemployed in 60 days. 60% of small businesses gone forever. People sold stocks during the March crash just to survive, but billionaires added $5.5 trillion to their wealth in 1 year. Jeff Bezos gained $70 billion. Elon Musk gained $140 billion. The fastest concentration of wealth ever recorded. And now, in 2025, Warren Buffett sits on $325 billion in cash, the largest reserve in history. Private equity firms have raised $2.5 trillion specifically to take advantage of the next downturn. They aren't just anticipating a crash, they're strategically positioned to profit from it. Meanwhile, the average American is more leveraged, more exposed, and more vulnerable than ever. When this crash hits sand, every major indicator says we are 6 to 18 months away. We may witness a $30 trillion or larger wealth transfer, the biggest in human history. And understand this clearly. It's not random. It's not just market forces. It's a mechanism. Let me show you exactly how wealth transfers during every crisis, who designed the system, and why the middle class is always the target. The 2008 crash wiped out $16 trillion in household wealth. Federal Reserve numbers. Middle-class net worth collapsed from a median of $140,000 to $82,000, 41% erased. 10 million foreclosures. Millions of lost jobs. Retirement accounts cut in half. But that wealth didn't evaporate. It moved. By 2006, the housing bubble was at extreme levels. Home prices doubled within 5 years. Mortgage lenders gave loans to anyone, no income verification, no down payments. Adjustable rate mortgages with teaser rates set to triple. Stated income loans where borrowers could write down whatever number they wanted. It was madness. But everyone was making money, so nobody questioned it. The wealthy started exiting early 2006 and 2007. Hedge fund managers like John Paulson and Michael Burry analyzed mortgage data and realized it was toxic. They saw borrowers who would collapse the moment interest rates reset. They exited positions, sold properties, reduced stock exposure, and moved to cash. But the middle class was told, housing never goes down. They were encouraged to buy as much as possible. Use home equity like an ATM. Real estate agents, mortgage brokers, and financial advisors all pushed maximum leverage. The middle class loaded up right at the peak. Then mortgages began defaulting in 2007. By 2008, the entire financial system was imploding. Middle-class families with adjustable-rate mortgages saw payments double or triple. A $2,000 payment became $5,000. Foreclosure followed. Families lost homes, equity, and their credit for 7 years. The stock market collapsed. S&P 500 fell from 1,500 to 666. A 50% crashed at middle-class families watched their 401ks cut in half and panic sold at the bottom. Millions lost their jobs. When you lose your job, you're forced to liquidate, sell stocks to pay bills, pull from 401ks, early, drain savings. This was forced liquidation. The middle class didn't choose to sell at the bottom, they were pushed into it through unemployment, foreclosure, margin calls, and survival pressure. But the wealthy had cash. Warren Buffett bought Goldman Sachs and Bank of America when nobody else would. He got preferred shares, paying 10% dividends, plus warrants guaranteed profit. Private equity firms bought entire portfolios of foreclosed homes. Blackstone acquired 40,000 homes. Invitation. Homes bought 80,000 homes at auctions for 30 to 50 cents on the dollar. Then the Federal Reserve stepped and dropped rates to zero, printed $4 trillion, bought bonds and securities to stabilize markets. That money flowed into assets. Stocks recovered. Real estate recovered. By 2013, everything was back to all-time highs. Crisis over 4 asset owners. But the middle class that sold at the bottom missed the entire recovery. Their homes became rental properties owned by private equity homes. They now rented at higher prices than their old mortgages. The stocks they sold at 666 climbed back to 1,500 without them. $16 trillion. Transferred not because wealthy were smarter, but because they had cash when the middle class was forced to sell and because the Fed inflated the assets they already owned. The system is built to transfer wealth exactly this way. March 2020, COVID strikes. Markets crashed 35% in 3 weeks, the fastest collapse in history. 22 million Americans lose jobs in 60 days. The service economy shuts down. Small businesses close 60%, never reopen. These weren't failing businesses. They were destroyed by lockdowns. Owners lost everything. The middle class panicked and liquidated. They sold stocks for cash. They drained savings. They tapped 401ks early. Forced liquidation again. But the wealthy weren't selling, they were buying. Billionaires added $5.5 trillion to net worth. Jeff Bezos gained $70 billion as Amazon skyrocketed. Elon Musk gained $140 billion. Tesla didn't suddenly become 7 times more valuable. This was another wealth transfer. Mark Zuckerberg gained $42 billion. Sergey Brin and Larry Page gained $35 billion each. Billionaire wealth jumped from $3 trillion to $8.5 trillion. Meanwhile, the middle class sold as the S&P dropped from 3,400 to 2,200, a 35% plunge. It felt like the world was ending. Hospitals overwhelmed, death counts rising, economy shutting down. Middle-class investors moved to cash and terror. Billionaires and institutions bought everything the middle class dumped. They knew the Fed would intervene, and the Fed did. Jerome Powell launched unlimited quantitative easing. They printed $6 trillion more than any other time in U.S. history. They bought corporate bonds, junk bonds, bond ETFs, mortgage securities, pumping liquidity into financial markets. Stocks recovered in 4 months. By August 2020, markets were back to all-time highs in the middle of a pandemic, during mass unemployment. Why? Because the Fed printed trillions and funneled it into asset prices. But the middle class who sold in March missed the recovery. Sitting in cash, scared, jobless, watching billionaires get richer. The real economy, the one ordinary people live in, collapsed. But the financial economy where wealthy people store their wealth was saved. The Fed doesn't care about jobs. They care about asset prices. Asset holders control the system. $5.5 trillion transferred in 1 year. Fastest wealth concentration in history. Same pattern as 2008. Same mechanism. And this mechanism follows the same 5 phases every time. Not by mistake, by design. Phase 1. The bubble. The Fed makes money cheap. Interest rates drop. Credit becomes easy. Asset prices inflate, stocks climb, real estate climbs. Everyone feels richer on paper. The middle class is told to invest aggressively. Buy stocks, buy homes, leverage up. Don't miss out. Advisors tell them to stay fully invested. The media glorifies success stories. The middle class buys at record highs. Meanwhile, the wealthy exit. They see extreme valuations. They sell systematically over 12 to 18 months. Buffett accumulates cash. Corporate insiders sell record amounts. Private equity raises funds, but doesn't deploy. Smart money exits while the middle class buys. Phase 1 complete. The middle class fully invested at the top. The wealthy holding cash. Phase 2. Tightening. The Fed raises interest rates. Money becomes expensive. Debt becomes suffocating. Adjustable mortgages reset higher. Corporate debt costs spike. Asset prices stall. Cracks form, but the middle class thinks it's just a correction. They stay invested. They buy dips. The wealthy don't buy, they hedge. They build short positions, buy put options, load up on protection. They prepare for the crash. Phase 3. The crash. Something breaks. A bank fails. A crisis erupts. The trigger doesn't matter. The system is fragile. Markets drop 32%. Real estate crashes, credit freezes. Forced liquidation begins. Margin calls liquidate middle-class portfolios. Job losses lead to foreclosures. Panic selling spreads. The middle class sells everything at the worst possible moment. Not because they're foolish, but because they're trapped by debt, unemployment, and fear. The system is designed to force liquidation. Phase 4. The transfer. Middle-class families sell everything. Wealthy buyers with cash buy everything. Foreclosed homes at massive discounts. Stocks at half price. Distressed businesses for pennies. Buffett buys quality companies. Private equity buys real estate portfolios. Hedge funds buy discount bonds. This is a transfer wealth, moving from forced sellers to cash-rich buyers. They hold for 5 to 10 years. Phase 5. The recovery. The Fed intervenes, drops rates to zero, prints trillions. Liquidity floods the system. Assets recover. Stocks climb. Real estate rebounds. Wealthy investors double or triple their money. The middle class misses the recovery entirely. The wealth gap widens again. This cycle has repeated in 1987, 2008, 2020, and it's happening again. Right now we're in late phase 2. The bubble ran from 2020 to 2022. The Fed printed $6 trillion. Markets doubled. Real estate surged. Bidding wars everywhere. The middle class bought at peak prices with maximum debt. Meanwhile, the wealthy exited. Buffett sold $100 billion in stocks. His cash pile is $325 billion, the largest in U.S. history. Bezos sold $13 billion in Amazon stock. Zuckerberg sold billions. Jamie Dimon sold for the first time ever. Insider selling hit levels not seen since 2007. Phase 2 began when the Fed raised rates from 0% to 5.5%, the fastest tightening since the 1980s. Mortgages jumped from 3% to 8%. Housing became unaffordable. Corporate debt tripled in interest cost. Commercial real estate is collapsing. Brookfield defaulted on billion-dollar towers. Over $2 trillion in commercial mortgages are maturing in 2025 and 2026. 40% can refinance. That's $800 billion in defaults. Regional banks who hold these loans are already failing. SVB collapsed in 2023. Signature Bank failed. First Republic failed. New York Community Bank nearly failed in 2024, and we're not even in recession yet. The middle class still thinks a soft landing is coming. Exactly what they believed in 2007. Every indicator points to phase 3, 6 to 18 months away. Yield curve inversion. Buffet indicator at 185%. Corporate debt stress. Commercial real estate implosion. Regional bank fragility. Consumer debt at $40 trillion. Leverage everywhere. One spark triggers the collapse. Phase 3. A 50 to 60% stock crash. Unemployment 12 to 15%. Regional bank failures in clusters. FDIC. Overwhelmed foreclosures rise. Forced liquidation everywhere. Phase 4 follows. The biggest wealth transfer ever recorded. Middle class holds $50 trillion in stock. Well, a 50 to 60% crash wipes out $25 to $30 trillion, transferring it to Buffett's $325 billion war chest. 2 private equities, $2.5 trillion. 2 hedge funds prepared to profit. They will buy homes, stocks, and businesses at fire sale prices. Hold 5 to 10 years, then the Fed prints trillions to reinflate. Why does the system work like this? Because it was built to... The Federal Reserve wasn't created for ordinary people. It was created by banking elites in 1910. On Jekyll Island J. P. Morgan and Rockefeller interests. The Fed's stated purpose is stability and employment. Its actual purpose is preserving wealth and power of the financial system. Banks make bad loans, Fed bails them out. Homeowners, not bailed out. In 2008, banks got trillions. 10 million families lost homes. Why? Because bailing out homeowners would prevent the wealth transfer. In 2020, the Fed printed $6 trillion. How much went to ordinary people? A $1,200 check. Small businesses closed permanently. But asset markets got trillions. Billionaires gained $5.5 trillion. Because the Fed funnels money into financial markets where the wealthy hold their wealth. This isn't a malfunction. It's the program. The crash is coming driven by commercial real estate defaults, regional bank failures, corporate debt, consumer leverage, and a fragile global system. $30 trillion will vanish, but it won't vanish. It'll move from forced sellers to prepared buyers. But you don't have to be the target. You can position yourself differently. First, hold more cash, 20 to 30% of your portfolio. Cash is power during a crash. Buying assets at 50% discounts creates more wealth than staying invested while your portfolio collapses. Second, buy protection SPY put options expiring in 6 to 12 months. DS2 20% below current prices. Cost 1 to 3% of portfolio. If markets crash 50%, those puts can 5-year SECIs. If they expire worthless, it's insurance. Bill Ackman turned $27 million into $2.6 billion in March 2020 using this exact method. Third, prepare a buy list companies with strong balance sheets and durable advantages. Apple, Microsoft, Google, J&J, Procter & Gamble, Visa. Buy when fear peaks and assets are 50 to 60% below highs. Not at the exact bottom, nobody can time it. But during maximum panic, that's how you switch sides from the forced sellers to the buyers. This pattern has repeated for a century, and 2025 is setting up exactly the same way. The wealthy have exited. Buffett has $325 billion ready. Private equity has $2.5 trillion ready. Insider selling is at record levels. The middle class is fully invested and fully leveraged. The largest wealth transfer in history is coming. The question isn't whether it will happen. The question is whether you'll be prepared, whether you'll recognize the pattern, whether you'll position yourself differently or become one of millions forced to sell at the bottom, transferring your wealth to someone who saw the system clearly and prepared. The system isn't designed for you. It's designed to extract from you. But if you understand the mechanism, the pattern, and the cycle, you have a chance. A real chance to avoid being the target. Maybe even a chance to be on the other side of the transfer.